What's up guys, it's Taneli here. It's the week 14 of my new artwork every week for a year challenge. Now this week will be a bit special for me because the day that I'm releasing this video, which will be Friday as usual, is also going to be my birthday. So by Friday I will be 30 years old, and for that reason I want to paint a self-portrait for this week's artwork. Now, I've done self-portraits before, probably like any other artist. For example, this is one I did last year, and while it is a pretty cool painting, I think it's a bit boring for YouTube channel. So I thought it would be fun if I painted myself, painting myself. Now, this concept has been done by other artists before, so I started thinking what could I do to make it feel more like me. And well, the thing that separates me from most other artists, well, first thing is that I actually enjoy painting with Microsoft Paint, and secondly is that I do all of my digital art with the mouse, so that is definitely something I want to include in the final artwork as well. Now, since I don't want to hold a mirror in front of my face for the whole time, let's start by taking a few reference photographs. So I think that should do it for the reference photos. Let's get to painting. I have a feeling that this is either gonna be the best or the dumbest idea I've had yet, but let's start sketching. So it's the editor Taneli from the future here. As you can see, I set up a second camera and even had a microphone ready to let some wonderful insight of my painting process just flow out of my mind. But after watching the footage, I came to a painful realization that I'm apparently an absolute blockhead when it comes to talking while I'm painting. I'm sure you had those moments when you've been expected to say something smart or funny and you just can't come up with anything. And like a day later, when you're trying to sleep, you can come up with like 8 perfect responses in a row. Yeah, well, that's about the summary of me trying to create YouTube videos. Luckily here, you can edit everything in afterwards and nobody would know any better. However, just to prove my point, I saved this clip from the second day of painting so you can see yourself what I mean. I think the shape of the head is a bit too narrow, so I think I need to do myself a little facial surgery to start the day. But basically that's the idea for today. Let's see how it goes. So I'm happy to say that the face surgery was a success. The patient is happy, smiling, holding a thumbs up. Everything good to go. Let's keep going. So yeah, that about proves my point. Anyway, to get back to the actual painting process, the idea for this painting was to have 2 portraits of me on one painting. So I started by painting this picture of me in front of my screen, obviously looking very proud of the painting I had just completed. I thought it would look funny if the first portrait looked a bit like a photograph and then there would be another more stylized painting of myself on the screen. So I spent the first 2 days of the painting process painting this first portrait using one main reference photograph I took a couple days ago. I even decided to wear the exact same shirt for the time lapse just to make the point about as obvious as the average plot of a Hollywood movie. Also, one more thing I need to mention is that holy wow, my posture when painting is like a piece of art in itself. I think I really need to start paying more attention to that, or I will be traveling the plains of this planet like a Gollum before I turn 40 years old. Anyways, the first portrait is nearing completion, so let's get back to the Taneli from the past and hear what he had to say about it. Alright guys, after 2 days of painting, this is where we're currently at. So this is where it gets more fun, as I get to come up with a funny portrait of myself on the screen. Originally, I thought I could just throw in a typical Microsoft Paint stick figure in there, but the more I thought about it, the more I came to the conclusion that it would be a pretty cheap and boring way to finish this piece. So instead, I've decided, after much thought, to paint myself like one of those Renaissance oil paintings, like in these examples here, because I've always wanted to paint myself with one of those fancy colors like these guys are wearing. And I think it would be a funny way to tie this silliness together and have a bit of contrast between old and new styles. So let's get to it and finish the painting. So I started the third day of painting by finishing some details with the keyboard and the screen. Now I'm doing something I'm usually trying to avoid when filming my painting time lapses, which is zooming in while painting. But considering how small the painting area was, there was absolutely no way that I could paint anything even remotely accurate without doing so. Now, the biggest problem when painting on such a small area is the fact that the smallest brush on Microsoft Paint is not quite small enough, so you have to find ways to work around this issue. So what you see me do a lot here is that I paint around the shapes to make them smaller than the brush allows me to paint. Now that we are getting to the second portrait, there is an interesting detail I focused a lot while painting, and it's about the colors in which I painted the portrait. Oil paintings are usually painted with quite a lot of contrast between light and shadow. However, as time passes, the contrast starts to fade out and the colors get less and less saturated and more yellow, which gives them this very old look. The third thing I had to consider was the fact that since I'm painting my portrait on what is supposed to be a computer screen, we also need to consider that the screen itself is emitting light, which would make everything on the screen look even less saturated and contrasted. So to put this all together, I had to think how an old oil painting would look like on a computer screen. So that is why you see me paint this with very faded colors and lacking a lot of that saturation and contrast that you would normally see in my paintings. I feel like I managed to get the look I was going for, which is better highlighted when compared to the first portrait, which you will see in just a bit. Now, regarding the portrait itself, I decided to give myself a bit of a mustache and beard because apparently every single man in the 16th century had them, and I want to stay true to the fashion of the times. Another thing I noticed when looking at old paintings is that almost every single person in them looks extremely serious or even somewhat angry, so I figured I'd copy that on my self-portrait as well. I'm not sure how accurate the likeness is to myself, but considering the size of the painting area, it's about as good as I could imagine getting. Now that the painting is almost ready, let's hear the final thoughts from Taneli of the past. After 3 days of intense painting, I can say the painting is done. It's finished. And I can say that I'm honestly really happy with the way it turned out. I know, you guys are probably like, well, where's the painting? Show us the painting. I will, but just a moment. I just quickly want to mention that if you are interested in learning how to paint on Microsoft Paint, there's a link to my full paint along tutorial down in the description below. Also, if you want to come and hang out, talk art and life in general, also check the link to my Discord channel also down below. I would appreciate if you click that like button and also consider subscribing for weekly art videos. Now, here is the final painting result.